Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening to you, Hannah. Lovely to hear your voice, and thank you for the intro this evening. It is Tuesday, I believe. It is the Late Show. You are with me, Lucy Neuburger. I can see Tom Rogers is here ready to go. I can also see Martin Saunders, who is one of the lovely people we are talking to this evening, is ready and raring to go. His colleague, Rob, and co-founder, actually, as well, should be with us momentarily. But while we're waiting for you to all join in, you know I love an intro. You know I love to kind of update you on the goings on in my own little mad corner of the education world. I can see Rob's here, lovely. Let's get him in and on board. Just a couple of things. So I don't want to take up your time too much this evening with anything that's not spelling related. But I'm just currently sipping a lovely cup of tea. And this tea, if you have not got hold of it, you need to. And I'm going to sound terribly kind of la-di-da, but this is not just any tea. This is Marks and Spencer's shortbread flavored tea, which I know is, and someone told me this the other day, that I think it was actually one of my Twitter colleagues, Briley, said to me, no, Lucy, that is very much a rip-off of Yorkshire's biscuit tea, which apparently is fabulous. I've not tried Yorkshire's biscuit tea, but I'm going to get hold of some, or I'm going to get somebody somewhere to send it to me because, as you know, I am based in Lisbon, not in the UK. So I tend to send shopping lists home, and then my mum, usually, bless her, dutifully brings out my Earl Grey because I am mentally 85. And other such things. I also discovered recently that there are chocolate orange Cadbury mini eggs. So those are on my shopping list. And if you've tried them, let me know, because apparently they are absolutely phenomenal. I can see Hannah is hearting already, so she's obviously had some. So if you have tried those, do let me know, because and honestly, anything chocolate orange, and you'll know from my rants around Christmas time that the things that make me happy at Christmas time, being the Grinch that I am, are chocolate oranges and being able to sulk in a corner until it's all over. The other thing I want to tell you before we move on to spelling this evening is that I played a game with my year fours today. And if you are a primary teacher, or indeed anybody, or if you need a icebreaker, actually, I don't think you'd ever get teachers to play this, but play it with kids of any age because it's hilarious. You split them into teams. And I did this today in the howling wind outside, with teams of about, I think there were 5 per team. And you get them to make themselves into different things. So, for example, at one point I did spaghetti and meatballs. So they had to turn themselves into spaghetti and meatballs. And just watching them try and turn themselves into these things is honestly the most entertainment you will ever have. So if you just kind of need to, get outside, or just kind of need a break, get them to do this. I did a boat with a captain. I made them turn themselves into animals. And honestly, I wish I could share the photos with you of this because it is comedy gold. Highly recommend. Anywho, that's that. We're gonna move on to actually what we're here for this evening, which is to talk to the lovely Rob and the lovely Martin from Spelling Shed, and to talk about how to teach spelling effectively. Now, from the banter that was going on amongst the Teachers Talk Radio execs, spelling is an interesting subject for many of us. Those of you who've listened to me with any regularity will know that I often have chats and conversations about the teaching of grammar, the teaching of spelling, and how I feel about that. So I'm very interested to chat to Rob and Martin this evening, because I think they'll have a lot to say and many helpful things to talk to us about. So without further ado, I'm going to bring them both on because I can see that they're both here and raring to go. I don't know who would like to unmute and introduce themselves first. Maybe we'll go for Rob first and Martin second. So if you could both unmute yourselves and introduce yourselves to the assembled listeners this evening.
Hello, this is
Rob.
Rob speaking. Hi, okay. Apologise, I'm a little bunged up. My nose is blocked from spending a week in the skiing trip last week. So don't want to make you jealous that I was skiing, but I've got a cold following spending a week in the cold snap. So bear with me. So I'm Rob, co-founder of Spelling Shed, along with Martin, and I think we've been going 7 years now. Martin will be able to pick me up on that if I'm wrong. Um, People might know me better as the founder of Literacy Shed, which has been going since 2013, and I normally talk about all things to do with film and writing. But tonight, I think we're going to talk about spelling. So
And
outside of my comfort zone slightly.
I'm sure you'll do absolutely fine. And Martin, over to you. A brief introduction.
Yeah, hi, I'm Martin. As Rob said, I'm co-founder at EdShed, Spelling Shed as we were. It was Rob, you're right. It's coming on 7 years. Um, I yeah, I don't have a karmic cold, unlike Rob.
Karmic cold, I like that.
I I'm I was just saying to my wife, there's a thing of we run a spelling product, we must be great at spelling, and it's almost the opposite. It sort of partly exists because you recognize the challenge, and it came from an idea of something we thought that would be helpful that's gone absolutely bonkers, really. So it's been an interesting few years, but hopefully some interesting and useful stuff we can share. What we're talking tonight.
Oh, definitely. And something that I want to come back to later on is because obviously Spelling Shed, for those of you who don't know, is actually global. You can use it all across the world. And I, as an international teacher, was talking to my colleagues about Spelling Shed and Literacy Shed earlier today. And they're like, oh yeah, I've used that. I know about that. So the international side I want to come back to, just mainly because of my own interest, but also I can see that Mr. Green, who's also an international teacher, is in this evening. I don't know if anyone else is an international teacher, so that will be a point to come back to. But what I kind of want to start with is why spelling, and why is it so important to teach this effectively? Because there are many arms to this, and certainly in the world we're living in today, where of course there's a lot more work happening on computers, there's a lot more sort of spell check and things like that available. Why, to the both of you, is it still important that we teachers from dot, I suppose, all the way up, is it important to be teaching spelling effectively?
Oh, wow, that's a wide question. I think we're judged on spelling immediately. You're judged in a job interview on spelling. You're judged on Facebook in spelling. Um, People judge menus on spelling. If you send a complaint and you say yous need to do something about it, and you spell use USE and you spell summit SUMMAT, then I think some people are going to take it a little less seriously than if you'd spelled it correctly. Um, but yeah, it's important, I feel, because to be able to spell, to encode and write words down is important, and also to be able to spell and decode and read words is important, especially for young children, because that's the nub of everything we do in school. So if children get frustrated with either writing or reading because they can't spell very well, they can't encode or decode very well, they're going to get a poor relationship with reading or writing. They're going to do less of it, and then they're going to get worse at it, and then they're going to become more frustrated with it and become less worse at it. So spelling is that first bit of reading with phonics right early on when we start reading and decoding with children. Um, that is really important for them to access the rest of the national curriculum, I think.
The other thing, which when you say something and you sort of it comes from nowhere, and you think that actually sounds quite good. A sort of throwaway comment I made at an expo trying to sell stuff was spelling is it's kind of the measurable outcome of what happens when kids understand words, and that goes far further than just being able to spell. Obviously, it is important, as Rob says, but there's so much of primary school certainly that's English is reading and writing, and it does feed into everything. But I mean, we teach phonics, understanding letters and sounds. We teach sentences. There's a thing in the middle that it's really important that you understand actually how words work, and when you do that, actually you can spell. It's just that's what you measure. So I think as well as being able to spell being important in itself, I think it is important to give children the building blocks that they need that have that kind of small step that enables them to do whatever the next thing is.
Oh no, absolutely. Now, I'm going to drop myself in it a bit here. I'm someone who, and regular listeners to me will know this, who bangs on, waxes lyrical about how I find sort of standalone grammar or standalone spelling teaching absolutely bloody dire, if I'm honest. And the idea of kind of doing a grammar lesson or a spelling lesson is just not my favorite thing. I don't kind of know really where to begin in terms of selling that to my pupils, and I'm sure I'm not alone here. So I suppose my sort of next thing here is to kind of sort of say to you, you know, some teachers kind of have challenges with this, and you know, have you experienced this? Is this kind of something that you've noticed at all, or am I kind of just dropping myself in it here, just shaming myself?
I agree, 100%. And I used to say this to my children as well. When I taught for 12 years primary school, upper primary, basically, was to say, but we need to do it. We need to be able to learn how to spell, and sometimes it's better just to remove it from your history lesson or your English lesson and just do it separate for 20 minutes 3 times a week or for half an hour twice a week. Um, it doesn't have to be an hour of spelling, but and make it interesting. I'm going to talk about etymology later, but our lessons at Spelling Shed include etymology. And one of the things my little boy's 8, Monty, he really is interested in etymology. I'm not just making it up. That that's true. And one that he likes is that disaster and asteroid come from the same root word. So astrum, meaning of the stars. So astrum is the word for star, and dis is bad. So disaster means bad things happening underneath the stars, disaster. And then asteroid means stars, and oids means form, so the form of the stars. And then things like asterisk, that means little star. And if you teach children that aster means star, that asterisk is a star, and asteroid and disaster, aster's spelt the same way in all 3 of those words. So you've not got to learn 3 different words there. You just have to learn one part of a word, aster, as in asteroid, and you can spell all those words. And I think kids that are 8, 9, and 10 and 11 find those things interesting.
Absolutely, I think they do. And there's a couple of things I want to pick up on there that you said, and of course, Martin, jump in at any point here. The idea that etymology, kind of the origins of words and things like that, is fascinating, but that's also cross curricular, because I know you mentioned sort of I think, did you say something about history, or kind of because
Yeah,
words come up in topics all the time, or in science, or even in
yeah,
maths, whatever it is.
yeah.
And so etymology and all of that can kind of feed into whatever you are doing, and the understanding of all these words and where they come from. So you're not just ever really just talking about spelling as a standalone thing, as I have mentioned. This is something that encompasses everything that we do as teachers.
Oh, indeed, I would bring it in all the time. If you're teaching about the Romans, bring in some Latin words. The word sound comes from sona and sonus, which is a Roman word. And then you've got Sony Walkman. That's the
Mm-hmm.
Latin for sound. So just
You're
pulling
showing
all
your
those.
age there, Rob.
Oh, well, but I could have said disc, but I could have mini disc.
I'm a child of the 90s. I'm right there with you.
But all these things do link together. But I think what we can't do is rely on them happening. You can't just say, "Oh, there's a word in the Romans bit there we can talk about, or this word in geography that we can talk about." I think you do need to have sort of a when and where to teach these words, especially further down for the emergent readers. I think that's where the phonics bit comes in, which is like the foundation of everything. And then moving on through school, I would teach spelling, all the time alongside everything else.
I think part of the craft of teaching, I mean, you talked about kind of having standalone lessons, and I think there is there's a key sort of part of that decision making about what do you do discreetly and what do you do kind of blended in. I mean, and giving things. I think learning is most effective when it's about making connections, and so when you have something in context, it really helps it stick. But equally, if there's something they just need to know, just tell them. And there's nothing wrong with saying, right, we're just going to do a short, concise, high intensity short burst of a very specific thing in a structured way, just like we do with phonics. It's that short, sharp daily thing that gives you a cumulative benefit. That sometimes that's the right thing to do, but equally when it gets drugged out and it becomes kind of kids just become disconnected from it, then actually maybe it's not the right thing. But that's sort of teacher judgment, isn't it?
Of course, and it's interesting actually that you mentioned, because I suppose, I mean, it's very true in the sort of reception year one, year two. Uh, Children go from having that kind of daily, very, very intensive, very short, sharp burst phonics, all those phonics lessons, which prove to be a lot of the time very, very successful. And then it just kind of, when you get into sort of lower key stage two, aside from those who maybe are having phonics interventions and things like that, it's sort of, for the most part, or certainly in the schools I've worked in, anything kind of approaching that kind of dies a bit of a death, and that seems really strange.
Which is why we have built it into our spelling program. I know other spelling programs do it as well now, because we just felt that, with teachers struggle when it comes to spelling. With time, because the curriculum is packed full of things that not necessarily need to be in there. And if anyone was on a primary box chat last night, which I hosted, we were talking about what would you get rid of the curriculum to free up the curriculum, and there's lots of things that people said I would do less of this or I'd do less of that, and I think allowing teachers the time to put spelling in there is really important, but also the curriculum guidance that we get as teachers, the national curriculum, it's very broad. It just says things like year three and four teach suffixes, but when and which order. Um, um, and it says the I sound spelt with the Y as in myth. Well, do you teach that before you've taught suffixes or after? It doesn't really tell you. So our programme and other spelling programmes and help you make those decisions. Do I teach a suffix AY before I teach a suffix IR, for example? Which suffixes should I teach and which ones are not really important? So I think it is really important that you have a scheme that takes you through those things that are the building blocks of both reading and writing, that I don't think you can leave up to chance very often.
No, and I think that's important. And sort of, we're kind of talking here about sort of building up students' learning in terms of spelling, in terms of phonics, in terms of all these things. If you were going to, and this is, I suppose, a broad question and trying to get you to be succinct at the same time. When it comes to sort of successful spellers, I mean, I suppose we'll talk about spellers in this context. What do you think are the essential skills that pupils need, and when do you think we should be starting? Is it right from EYFS, for example, upwards, or maybe do we need to start a little bit later? What do you think is the sort of, in the broadest sense, the timeline here?
EYFS year one and year two need to know letter sound correspondences, basically. So by the end of year two, they should know that those little squiggles represent sounds. And the two little squiggles together represents churn. S and T together represents this sound. And that those sounds can change, so that the A in a word like cat is an A, but it could be A in play or in paint when it's joined together with A and Y. That's what I would teach until midway through year two, the first 3 years. And then once you're in year 3, 4, 5, and 6, then start teaching about morphemes, affixes, root words, suffixes, prefixes, because they're really important. Because, you can teach children to remember 1,000 words by sight, maybe 2,000 words by sight. But if their working memory is 30,000, 40,000, 200,000 words, they can't remember all those and how to spell them. And I think we need to be teaching them how to put those parts of words together, and that's what we're doing in years 3, 4, 5, and 6.
I think it's almost not quite a misconception, but I think thinking of spelling and phonics as being discrete, separate things, I think is a bit of a mistake. And I think if you look at year one, year two, the sort of phonics that they're doing, where they're looking at O or ow for snow or cow with an OW, that's spelling. That's making a choice of what is the correct grapheme to use for this sound in this word. That's the beginning of spelling, and year one, year two, spelling is 100% phonics based. To a point. Year two is where the sort of morphology stuff starts to come in, and that's all you're really doing. It's a progression of phonics, and then you're adding in another factor of morphology, adding in some other sort of choice rules. You've already got common exception words, high frequency words, homophones, all that sort of stuff. So it goes right the way through from using sounds even right down in kind of nursery level. You're just adding sophistication as you go, but there isn't really a single clear. I mean, if there's a transition, I suppose it's in year 2, but it isn't really a sharp and hard sort of break point. You just start to introduce a bit more kind of complexity to the rules,
Oh, absolutely. And excuse me, losing my voice already. I mean, I suppose what I want to kind of do now is you both of you have sort of talked about that journey and how it morphs. How does Spelling Shed specifically support this? Because I've had a look through the website, I've had a tinker around, and it's very clear to me that you can see the progression through the stages. You can kind of see it's all very sort of clearly laid out for you, and there's sort of a lot going on. But I think you can explain this obviously far better than I can. But I just want to kind of understand sort of how you're linking the timeline that you just described to me and how that fits into what's on the Spelling Shed curriculum, if you like.
Okay, so nuts and bolts, I suppose to start with, you've got our schema work / curriculum, depending what country you're in and what you call it. That gives you the progression, the weekly objectives, and that's where we've done the work to break down, well, actually, what do you need to learn? What order makes sense? Which are the best words to use as practice for that? The planning that includes etymology at an appropriate level and at an appropriate quantity, because some of it does get quite in depth. Some of it is more useful than others. The Asta example is a great one. There's some stuff in there which, certainly for younger children, we sort of selectively don't have. So we've kind of done that thinking to develop a program which is all, the teaching methods are all research based. So we don't have things like word coffins and memorization, look cover right check, which is nonsense and doesn't work for anybody, and all that sort of stuff that we've got rid of.
I was
Word
waiting
searches,
for one of you to bring it up.
rainbow
And
words.
yeah, the dreaded spelling test. I mean, I certainly have had to fight my
Yeah.
corner on that a number of times, and then it took me, I think, actually sending explicit research where it's like, this does not work.
Yeah, lots. I think a lot of spelling, like the old, traditional impression of what you think teaching spelling looks like. What tends to happen is kids get given 10 words, they don't know why. They go home, come back, they do a test, and they fail. They're told to learn them, they don't know how, and everyone starts all over again, and it doesn't really achieve anything. The difference, whether you use our teaching content or not, really, is what we're saying and what research says is that you should teach a skill set. You're teaching children to look at the sort of substructure inside words. And what we've done is try to follow obviously the curriculum, but make some sense of it and make teachers' life easy by having a thing that you can pick up and teach, and a resource that the children can just have in front of them to fill in the boxes instead of having to get a ruler out and all that sort of nonsense, laying things out in a book. So we just try to make it easy and clear and straightforward, but layer up that knowledge. The other side of Spelling Shed is obviously the tech, and a lot of that is about practice, because no matter how sophisticated you are, you still have to practice things. When you learn something, your brain physically rewires. That takes effort, and the effort comes in the form of practice. If you want to be good at something, you do it until you can do it fluently. And that's where going and learning words until you can just about pass a test isn't really enough. Doing it because you want to get the highest score and you're trying to play it and it's enjoyable, you fundamentally do it more, so you get more practice, so you embed it further. Also, it's motivating. Kids enjoy it. My favorite thing about my job is when kids say that Spelling Shed is better than Fortnite and that sort of thing.
High praise indeed. Very
exactly.
High praise.
And I mean, there's loads of stories that we've had that they're really humbling. Like kids who have sort of all sorts of backgrounds that absolutely love our product and are proud of their progress because they've used our product, and it enables them to do a thing, partly because it's an obvious correlation. And you think the children who generally do worst on a spelling test are the ones who practice the least, and that's obvious, but it's the ones who expect to fail, so they just don't bother, and if they don't practice, and it just becomes a vicious circle. And I think that's sort of something that we almost accidentally got right, is we sort of made the game was the first part of our product, really, and we made it so you always succeed, you just succeed with more or less help. And I think that enables children to just keep on going and just have another go and another go until actually you can actually do it, and so it's sort of it joins the dots up for them, and it gives them a reason and a context. So it's not just, oh, we're just sitting doing this boring thing. It's a thing that in a child's sort of viewpoint has currency and has value, and just sort of makes it a focal point of a thing that matters from a school point of view. And obviously, the other side, you mentioned the word test, and I've mentioned tests. And I mean, whether you choose to do tests or not, I mean, we've got a thing called a Hive game, which is like a bit like Kahoot as a sort of similar experience. So it's live multiplayer. If you've got enough devices, it's fun, and how you get the same data as a test. But actually, if you don't do that and you don't want to do a test, if the children have played the game, you can see who can spell which words, so you can make a judgment, and the system will say, these children have got this level of sort of skill on these words. So actually, do you need, if what you need to know is that they've learned stuff, if you've got that, do you really need to, submit kids to a test if it's a sort of a negative experience? What matters is that you've been able to do your assessment, and you free up 20 minutes to do something else, do some more reading or do some art or whatever else.
Oh, that's brilliant, and I think that it's I wanted to come back a little bit more to sort of gamification a little bit later on. I'm hoping we're going to have time, because again, there's some thoughts on that I'd like to ask you about. But of course, we're very much talking about spelling, but that links to, and we've already mentioned this, so many other things. And I'm going to put a question to you in a moment about sort of how that all links to reading and to developing key literacy skills. But I also want to ask the question, because I get asked by so many parents, and I just want to know your thoughts on it. Does reading improve spelling? Which is kind of a weird question, but I'm going to let you just think about it for a moment, because I just want to remind listeners that, speaking of reading and all such things, we still have our John Cat discount available for you. So we've got a discount which is JCTTR2324, and that still even now gives you 20% off all the books in the John Cat catalogue. So if you are looking for some CPD, some things that you all want to read to improve any area of education that you would like to read about, go and have a browse on the John Cat website, and you can put that discount to good use. So hopefully I've given enough of a moment there for Martin and Rob to consider my question. If you need a refresher, I'll try and remember what I just said, but if not, I can let one of you jump in as soon as you are ready.
So the simple answer, I think, is yes, because in the teaching of spelling, it's, as I said, it's not just that isolated. You spell cat, C-A-T. If you can spell cat, C-A-T, then you know what a cat is. It's a small furry animal, and you make those links together. So making that link between spelling and vocabulary knowledge is also aids comprehension, aids fluency. If children have a working oral vocabulary, it's much higher than the reading vocabulary. So if you come across the word owl, most 4 or 5-year-olds will know what an owl is, but they might not be able to spell it. But once you teach children how to spell the word owl, they'll be able to read the word owl. And when they come to that word in their text, in their reading book, they'll be able to read the word owl as well. And I think going back to morphology, if you're teaching morphology, you've not got to teach all the separate words. If you think about the word happy, and then think about all the suffixes and prefixes you could add to that. So you've got happiness and happily and unhappy and unhappiness and unhappily. Rather than teaching 6 words, you're just teaching 1 word, but also teaching the meaning. Un means not, and I-L-Y or L-Y means it's an action. So happily is the way she's doing something. So unhappily means she's not doing it in a happy way. That helps with comprehension. So when children read the girl sat in the corner unhappily, then you start to get they can start to deduce characters' feelings and etc. etc. So just by looking at morphology such as ED, something's in the past. So she walked to school. She's already done it in the morning. So you can just, by looking at the different spellings, it also gives you meanings of words, which aids comprehension.
Fabulous. So Sorry, I've completely lost my train of thought. I was listening very intently then, so I've now completely forgotten where I was going to go with the next part. I suppose where I want to go is, I mean, ultimately, Spelling Shed is, as much as it's to do with spelling, of course, it's linked to the other EdShed apps and things like that. But the tech side of this, now we know and we are very, very acutely aware that tech is evolving. AI is now in the mix as part of our world today, and that's ever changing. What does that mean in terms of spelling? Because, and I think we touched on this already, where we sort of said, there are ways and means of using every kind of spell check under the sun. You actually, I very much find myself relying on predictive text. And again, I know I'm not the only one. I'm really trying not to just drop myself in it this evening. As I said, we on the Teachers Talk Radio exec were talking about the shortening of words earlier, people to PPL. Tom Rogers, looking at you. He knew I was going to drop him in it this evening, and I'm sure he's going to tell me off for that. But what do you think this means, and do you think there's still going to be value for something like Spelling Shed with all this advancement happening every single day?
Yeah, if I could just jump in, Martin, I think until we ask children to use a computer all day, every day, then they'll have to spell. Because my children in school handwrite nearly all day. I sit in my office. I've got a big desk full of notes here that are handwritten on a remarkable tablet. I don't know if anyone has got one of those yet, but I use a pen to write on a tablet, and then I type them out. So I've got typed notes in front of me, and it's quite interesting that Martin added some notes before, and I've just edited it because he spelled Jeopardy wrong, and that's typed out. So the spell checker didn't check that, did it? So, and I just think if we're asking all the time, how do you spell touch? How do you
Fix
spell?
it.
How do you spell technology? Then it's not. It's going to be very, very slow. And again, spell check doesn't pick up if you're spelling something, SUMMAT. Spell check's not going to check. Not going to help you with that word, I don't think, unless it becomes a bit more sophisticated. So I think it is needed. It's useful, but if you want to produce proficient, fluent writers, and not writers who have to ask Alexa every other word, how do you spell this? Then I think, it's really important that we carry on teaching spelling.
I mean, my background's very much tech, really, or a certain portion of it. I've done all sorts of daft things, but more. I was tech before I was education, I suppose. And what I think the thing with all technology really is it's a tool, and you need to know the job you're trying to do before you use a tool. If you give, I know my wife used to work in forest school, and so she's there with saws and pieces of wood with 4-year-olds, and and they make some great stuff, but they're obviously not going to make like some amazing Wedgwood cabinet or something because they don't have the knowledge of that. They have the tool and they could do something with it. And I think that's the same thing with spelling. You kind of need to know. I mean, homophones particularly. You can write something which each word is spelled correctly in a sense, but actually not for that context. And even with the grammar check, I mean, you get the little blue line, don't you? But it's not always right. And how you choose to use language to communicate is quite subjective and personal. And having that sophistication of understanding is important when you choose to be able to choose to ignore what it's suggesting you might want to say when it's not quite right is important, I think, if you want to do it to a high standard.
Yes, and I often find I'm fighting my correction software, my chosen correction software, because I don't enjoy an Oxford comma, and I might be to do with the settings on my particular chosen brand of corrective. Sounds awful, corrective software, but yeah, it tries to fight me on it, and because I don't enjoy an Oxford comma, I don't choose that option. I tend to leave it out. And I'm sure there are people on here. We could debate the use of the Oxford comma, but that is not what we're here for. And as you know, it's one of many things that I like to wax lyrical about, but maybe another time on that one. So we're I suppose spelling, much like a lot of these things, much like handwriting as well, these are disciplines, if you like, and ways of thinking and ways of using our minds, using our skills that do really have the potential to to disappear. But as Rob's just, we're not there yet. I mean, I certainly in my English lessons, children are writing every day. Granted, it's not pages and pages. We're not doing a thesis or anything like that, but they're still handwriting every day, and I still think that that's important. I'm not saying it has to be beautiful cursive because I do not write in cursive. That's another aspect, another thing that another hill that I regularly try and die on. But as long as it's legible, I'm all right with that. But I still think it's a skill that they do need to practice. But I'm not having them sit there, like I did in primary school, doing kind of pages and pages of it. I'm just kind of making sure that it is readable and that they're still able to utilize that skill. So I think it's interesting. But do you think that there will come a point where spelling is not important, or the teaching of spelling is not as important because it's just going to be done for us, or do you think that we've still got a way to go before we end up in that spot?
I think you'll always need to know, it's understanding words is is the kind of, the big picture. And as I say, I said a while ago that the thing that I sort of come to think that just because you measure spelling as is it, it's a binary, is it right or is it wrong? Okay, but actually there's a lot more to it than that. And I think if you want, any language to be able to do language, you need to understand the subcomponents, how the grammar works, how the words work, and that is just spelling essentially.
I think a lot of the time we say spelling is you writing the words down. You writing once upon a time, but actually you need to be able to spell to read once upon a time as well. And I don't think there's ever going to get to a point when we go, we don't need to read anymore because everything can be read to us. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I know there are more and more talking books, and more you can press a button and your computer will tell you something. But I just feel like it's thousands of years away before anybody goes, let's just stop reading.
There's research which I can't remember who it did, but Amelia, our head trainer, has a great reference list. And there's one which says there's the spelling of process. When you spell a word in your mind, the process in your brain is called orthographic mapping, and actually it's the same part of the brain that does the exact opposite process when you read. And so it's a constructing understanding of the words is a part of comprehension, and I don't think you can get away from that.
Oh, we're getting geeky here. I love this. When we get, I know I love a research rabbit hole. I so much so that it's actually in my Twitter bio. So you want to get geeky, you want to get into the nitty gritty, please do, because I love this. This is the kind of stuff I absolutely live for, and I think that's really interesting as well. And I really. And I think the thing I'm struggling with as a teacher at the moment is, and again, this is going to sound awful, but kind of the dumbing down of things, or the idea that things are being dumbed down. And I suppose what I worry about is that they're just going to be parts of our brains, and maybe I'm catastrophizing, but they're parts of our brains that are just going to sort of end up kind of dying off because we're not using them. And I suppose in a way, as teachers, we have a responsibility to kind of say, we're not kind of keeping these skills alive and doing this as a sort of punishment or as something old fashioned, but actually there's almost more to it, as we've talked about already this evening, than just the sort of the fundamentals of spelling. This is lighting up all kinds of parts of our brains as well. And certainly, as we mentioned earlier, the idea of using games and things like that, it's sparking different parts at all times, and that's also really, really important as well.
Oh yeah, and I think that's why it annoys me slightly. Well, it annoys me quite a lot that primary school spelling in the UK is often boiled down to a 20 mark spelling test in the SATs and
Sorry,
and 3 marks in the writing or whatever it is. Since I last did some moderation, so it's much more than that. Spelling is that building block of reading and writing that everybody needs to be able to read and write. Yet we boil it all down to a test in year 6.
and that is horrifying. I mean, I've never actually taught in year 6, but I've certainly taught in year 5, and just again, it's we've touched on this as well, where the idea of doing something completely out of context, or even testing on something that's completely out of context, is so absolutely ridiculous and arbitrary, and has been proven countless times to be ineffective. So why we're still plugging away with this, I mean, mostly because we have to, but why this is still a thing is absolutely baffling to me, and I'm sure to you as teachers as well.
We get asked quite a lot, can we have all the words that are in the national curriculum for year 3 and 4, or can we have all the words that are in the national curriculum for 5 and 6 on one test, so we can just repeatedly test the children on them? And you're like, well, we're trying to teach the children how to spell. We're trying to teach them how to spell any words and all the words, and you're just trying to get us to condense that down into 30 or 40 words, and it's just really bad. My driving instructor, I passed my test the third time, and the second time I failed my test, I went somewhere I'd never been before in the car, and I drove around and I failed my test, and I said to the driving instructor, why have I never been down the test route? Because there's 3 test routes where I'm from in Widnes. Why have I never been down the test route? He said, Rob, I'm teaching you to drive anywhere. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve with spelling. We're trying to get children to be able to spell anything. And sometimes we're fighting against teachers that want them to be able to spell an exact list of 50 words sometimes. So it's trying to get teachers to understand that if you follow these processes, if you teach it for an hour a week or 20 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day, and you embed it and find those golden threads through all the other subjects, if you're teaching Romans or geography or Latin, that you'll be able to spell any word. And if you give it time...
Yeah, go ahead.
I think time is really important as well. We haven't got time to do it. When we teach phonics, and we're a phonics scheme as well, and we're guilty of it, they learn a sound a day for a week, and the next week they learn 5 new sounds, and the week after that they learn 5 new sounds. And then at the end of it, the teacher says, oh, this child just can't do phonics. It's because they had to learn a new sound every day, but they needed to learn a sound every 3 days. I needed to learn a sound every 10 days. And we just haven't got time to do that in schools. It's so busy because we're going to test them at the end of the year on how many of those sounds they've learned, not how well they can, how well they can do it. So I think it's about giving it time. And our education system doesn't give teachers enough time to teach spelling and to teach phonics properly and to teach reading and all the other things you need to know about the Stone Age. So
I know, and it's certainly interesting because I'm in international school, but we use the English curriculum with kind of bits borrowed from it as a mishmash, but it's English curriculum. And so kind of teaching it in the context that I am now, where large parts of it are absolutely irrelevant to the group of children that I have. It's really interesting to sort of see just how badly it's put together, certainly in respect to things like spelling, punctuation, grammar, reading, all of these things. And as you say, there is the time given is so ridiculous, and is very apparent that, and again, another thing that there's a lot of rants coming out this evening, as I knew they would, but the curriculum that was put together by people who we are well aware have not set foot in classes for a long time. We've been stuck with it since 2013, 2014, which actually just predates my career. And the fact that, nothing much has really changed in that, in 10 years is horrifying, particularly in the wake of COVID and everything else. I always like to get a COVID reference into as many shows as possible, but that's true. We had so much of an opportunity to look at things differently, and in large part we haven't. And so it's scary to me that something as fundamental as what we're talking about this evening is in parts glossed over as well. And I will tell you a secret as well. I actually have a printed year 3-4 spelling list on my English working wall in my classroom. Have I referred to it once this year? Have I hell? It's there. I can picture exactly where it is on the wall. I have never referred to it. It's wallpaper, which is absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. But as you say, I mean, unless I'm actually finding an excuse to drop these words into whatever I'm doing, I may have accidentally done it in kind of modelled examples of things, but I couldn't tell you which ones. I couldn't even tell you. I actually couldn't confidently tell you a single word that's on that list, which is terrible as well. So there you go. I don't know what that
tells. Potatoes is on there, I think.
Is it actually?
I think so. Yeah. Potatoes, then it progresses to vegetables in year 5-6, if I'm right. Something like that.
My favourite year one is astronauts in the year 1 list.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yacht. Where's yacht? Yacht's on the
Yachts,
3-4
yes,
list.
5-6. Do you know, my
Oh.
etymology fact that I like for yachts is that it comes from the Dutch German Jachter, which means pirate or hunter, which is what you don't tell the kids, is it's also the origin for Jägermeister is master hunter. So.
Oh, I love that we've gone from talking about little kids and learning to bringing in Jägermeister, which is revolting, by the way.
Etymology everywhere.
Etymology
I was,
everywhere.
yeah, I was going to say,
I'm assuming, Martin, you have not used that reference in a classroom context.
maybe in the staff room, but no, I was going to
Pub
say,
quiz. Staff quiz
yeah, that's
question.
it.
Christmas quiz. There you go. You can use it
That's
then.
That's it.
Fabulous.
You were saying about so international, and it's something that I think has been a real privilege and fascinating in our little journey, going to different places and having the opportunity to look into different curricula, different systems, but also actual real classrooms in different countries. And some of the things that you look at, you get a much broader sort of idea of like, well, what works and what doesn't, and what's particular to our system or someone else's system. And I mean, the one thing that really struck me, I went into it was a high school in a township in Cape Town in South Africa, and I walked in and there were 50 kids, one teacher, a blackboard, no lights, and it was a little bit intimidating, I have to say. And the kids were absolutely lovely. There was a bit of banter. There was a relationship that you could see with the teacher and the children. And there was this universality of like, it's just a classroom. Every classroom, there is that stuff that's the same. But then looking at the curriculum, you sort of, you see the stuff which there's the same ways that you can chop up English. There's the things that kind of don't maybe matter so much. There's great, everywhere you go, there's great stuff to learn. American classrooms, South African classroom, British classrooms, Spanish classrooms, wherever you go, there's great stuff. And I think it's a real shame that more of that doesn't get shared, and just simple practice, simple routines that really effective ideas that I think we're richer for sharing that and learning from each other.
And I certainly think, and this is something else I've talked about with other international colleagues, and I don't know if this is true everywhere, but I often feel that we as international schools are almost a little bit behind in the sense, because I mean the reason I'm able to keep up with things in the UK and kind of the goings on and the changes there is largely actually through Teachers Talk Radio and through the kind of things I do there, because many of my colleagues from Teachers Talk Radio are based in the UK, and so I read UK news, all of that. So I'm aware, but I think other people are sort of not necessarily deliberately, but kind of a bit more sort of checked out of things. And so we're not necessarily moving forward, and the curriculum innovation isn't necessarily there, or the awareness of things like EdShed and Spelling Shed. People they're not kind of quite as, it sounds terrible and sort of badly phrased, but are not as maybe with it in terms of all these things. And I know that, for example, the tech side of it freaks a lot of teachers out, even the ones who aren't, and again I'm dropping myself in here, but aren't of a certain age. I even have a very good friend of mine. She's actually an ex-colleague, but kind of comes and does sort of supply work in school. She sort of says to me, Lucy, you're the techie one. I'm not, for the record, but of the two of us, I am. And she said, all these apps and things, could I ever go back into a school and teach? I'm like, yeah, you could, because you can be taught how to use these things. You can understand how to use them, and actually looking at Spelling Shed, it's very intuitive. And actually with these kids of today, they're teaching you how to use this stuff. Let's be honest, they're the ones leading the way. Often I've found you give kids iPads for certain things and they're like, actually miss, you do it like this, or actually I don't need your help, I can, I've figured it out. And you're like, all right then, great. Crack on.
I think it's their lack of fear of breaking things, because they haven't got to pay for it, have they? So they just press stuff, and most things are robust enough that actually that's fine. But we have the fear, don't we? What if I delete it, or what if I do something wrong? So they don't have that, do they?
I'm going to cut in here, gents, and say hi. I have been here the whole time, but I wanted to. We've had a comment there, a question from somebody, Adriana. She says, and I'm sure Lucy can pick up the conversation in a minute, but this question is just strategies and examples to support SEND students, particularly those with cognitive impairment. Now, I know you've got lots of free and sub resources on Spelling Shed, so I wonder whether you could just sort of briefly highlight where people like Adriana could look. on Spelling Shed?
Okay, I think so. Let's start with a simple strategy. In a way, the strategy which is universal, which is quality first teaching, I suppose, is being systematic and explicit. And I think you do obviously have to go at the pace of children, but making it clear what it is that they're supposed to understand. I mean, there's some modifications that we quite often tell people. If you have you're teaching a skill and you have a list of words, you can sometimes all you need to know is that they know that particular week's pattern. So if you've got words that are a bit more complex, that are challenging because they've got multiple different sort of spelling patterns embedded, you can sort of jettison those and have a simpler word list of say 4 or 5 simpler words, as long as you're practicing that specific skill. And then, I mean, it's really hard because every child's their own person and has their own sort of challenges. And so it does just come down to rigor and pace and assessment. And the other thing which Rob said a thing about phonics, and something that you do have this pace in phonics, but actually something that is a feature of phonics that I think is really helpful is the refresh thing at the beginning of a lesson, where you run through the flashcards and you keep that kind of learning active, and so you're adding to a pool rather than moving on. And I think it's important to keep revisiting as much of the prior learning as you can, and then constantly, when you do find that something hasn't quite stuck, that revisiting and refreshing, I think that's, what you're trying to do is expand a kind of knowledge set. And so, navigating it in a explicit, deliberate fashion, but also thinking in terms of growth rather than progression, I think is sort of the generic way to do it. But then obviously, I think a lot of, actual specific things, I think very often the biggest or most prevalent challenge for children who it's the ones who can't decode, and they get to year 6 and they can't segment and blend. And it's a speech and language issue really above everything else. And it's if they can't, or a hearing issue very, really often, like if they can't hear and speak words, they really don't have the first sort of tier of tools to then go on and spell, because there's a building block further back. And I think it's, going back until you find actually what is that roadblock, dealing with the, whether it's visual processing or, as I say, speech and language or hearing or just oracy. I mean, oracy is, if you can't speak it, how are you going to spell it? So I think that's a sort of general strategy of, finding what's the barrier and then systematically working your way through it.
And I think something that lots of schools do with those children is once they get to Key Stage 2, they say, phonics hasn't worked. What can we do instead? And they get rid of phonics. But phonics is the thing that's going to help them, I think. Because I think what we do is we say, let's try a different method. Let's just get them to memorise words. Let's go back to flashcards like we did when I was a kid and had a Golden Virginia tin with my flashcards in. And that works. And you get immediate effect from that because children can remember the words. So they might remember 10, they might remember 20, 40, 50, 1,000 words, 2,000 words even. And it looks like they've achieved. But then once you get past those 2,000 words in year 5 and 6, they're still struggling because they can't remember any more after they've learnt those 2,000 or they've started forgetting some of those words. So we really do need to persevere with these strategies in year 3, in year 4, 5 and 6, looking at phonics, continuing with phonics and building on that foundation. It's almost like you're spending thousands of pounds on superb concrete foundations for your house, and you've run out of money, and then you just put a shed on top. You need to carry on building. Yeah, carry on going.
Well, interesting you should say that. Tom Hopkins Burke, one of my esteemed colleagues, is actually doing a show tomorrow about phonics in secondary school, which will be, or part of his show tomorrow, will be a really interesting listen, which I'm very intrigued to listen to, because we, as you have rightly said, we throw the kitchen sink at it in primary school, or at the very least try to, and then sort of in secondary school, there are kids going into secondary school who are still struggling with fundamentals for whatever reason that is, be it to do with additional need, be it to do with, anything, illness, whatever it is. It should never just stop because because we're moving on in the timeline, in the education timeline. Admin Hannah has been very patiently sitting with her hand up. Hannah, what piqued your interest there? What did you want to say?
My son is the child that Martin was talking about, because my son is partially deaf and has a speech delay and has been going to an SRB unit. He's now in year 2 and at that point where he's about to leave, but he really struggles with transferring his spelling because he's not quite pronouncing everything, and he is that little bit further behind. But for me, I was like, how do I increase his pace to be able to catch up with everyone else? Is my worry, and especially when he loses that SRB support next year, that he doesn't get even further behind.
I think the temptation is you want to kind of go fast, but actually going slow is the way to go fast, because if you don't have that foundation, you're just not, you're not going to be able to progress because you haven't got the starting point. I mean, my son actually, but he's makes me feel old. He's 20 this year, which boggles my mind a little bit. But he had hearing problems when he was sort of year 1, year 2, and he was like almost going to have grommets but didn't. And you can see, I see now the sort of the impact that had on him for the whole of his primary career. And he worked very hard in secondary school to then not do an exam because of COVID, which he's a bit gutted about still, because he wanted to show what he could do. And I just say, take your pass, you got it, it's fine. But I mean, you could see that the impact of just, as you say, not being able to hear and not being able to kind of find the subunits that you're working with. It's such a barrier, but you're not going to be able to progress until you have that in place. So I think dealing with the speech, speaking and listening, oracy, phonics stuff, then generally what happens is developmentally children are a bit older, and that they catch up quickly when they've got that foundation. But I think it's really important to have the toolkit to start from. Otherwise, it's really hard to kind of layer up the next steps.
Fantastic. HB's ears were clearly burning. Tom, hello. Were you?
I just came to plug my show for tomorrow.
Oh, I was way ahead of you. Did you? I don't know if you heard.
I did. I heard you mention it, and I thought, fantastic. Yes, I've got Adam Levick, who is a teacher of reading, a former primary teacher who this September has stepped up to work at secondary. So working with students who have gone from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3 who are still struggling with early reading. And I've also got Charlie Duckett, who does that as well. So, really enjoying the show. And I'm looking forward to listening to it. I'm doing my marking at the moment, so I'm now going to disappear before I get a clip around the ear from Tom Rogers.
Nothing like using a fellow host show to plug your own show, but we share the love on Teachers Talk Radio. This is what we do. It's a very we all kind of like to help each other out and wind each other up and drop each other in it. And clearly, it's we all really like each other. Honestly, it's so Rog, don't tell him off too much. And it was relevant. So it's fine. I've now completely lost my train of thought again. So let's try and get back on track here. Rob and Martin, you have to understand that my shows are a little bit chaotic, but we get there in the end. It's all part of the fun. So we will press on. What I wanted to kind of talk to you about next, and I realise we've kind of darted about a bit, so if anyone wants to come back to anything at any point, please do request to speak, please do share your questions, please do tweet them. This is not just a conversation between us, it's a conversation between everybody. So if anything over the course of this evening has piqued your interest, or if indeed you want to ask our lovely guests a question, please do feel free to, and we can connect you up and you can ask away. And even if it's something that we've mentioned previously, because we love a tangent. We love a tangent. My current tangent was going to be to move on to talk a little bit more about gamification, because this is something that, and again, other teachers, you can kind of jump in here and say what you think. I am an R with gamification, because on the one hand, I'm kind of the sort of, if you can't beat them, join them. These kids love a game, as we've established. That's what engages them. If it kind of gives them points, coins, whatever it is, if it goes whiz bang, it holds their attention. Cracking, brilliant. On the other hand, I'm kind of like, well, that we still have to be able to teach and hold their attention in ways that don't necessarily involve a screen or involve us being kind of entertainment officers or kind of standing on our head and playing the violin or whatever it is. So I go between, because on the one hand I look at something like Spelling Shed and I'm like, this is kind of the answer to me kind of almost, and this is going to sound terrible, partly as a get out of jail free card, because it kind of does my job for me in a way. But on the other side to that, I'm like, am I I still need to supplement this. I still need to use it in context. I can't just be like, right, spelling shed's the answer and off I go. So I just kind of wonder where you sit with this. Now, obviously, you're very pro all these things, but do you think there is a balance to be struck here between using something like spelling shed and feeding that in and using that as part of a wider curriculum?
Okay. Another big question, isn't it?
It is.
So
Sorry.
let's start. So okay. So if you think about sort of how we learn, and I mean, sort of gamification as a little buzzword. I mean, what they're doing is playing. And if I get given a new gadget, what I instantly say is, I'm going to have a play with it, and I'll figure it out. And because I'm quite confident with tech, I've done it for enough years, but I play with it. If you look at young children in, certainly early years, their whole curriculum in early years really is based around play. But that's just how they're exploring and discovering and interacting with the world, and that's absolutely appropriate. And this whole packed curriculum means that we're really short on time, and so in a way the play gets kind of pushed out. But actually, I mean, that was you open the door for COVID. In COVID, something that I thought was really interesting in my school. So I'm chair of governors at a primary school, which I think I'm in my 13th year and my third head teacher, which is Bewdley Primary School. So hi Bewdley. And in one period in COVID, there were the year ones went back and the year twos didn't. And what was interesting, we had half a year one class, but no curriculum, which was a bit weird. And everyone just kind of was like, well, what do we do? Because we've got to have these kids, and they were the key workers kids, I think, if I remember rightly. And what happened was something very much like an early years curriculum, where everyone, and the old, other children came back that were key workers kids that were other ages, but everybody basically did this sort of investigative, exploratory, project based kind of thing, because they had that freedom, and it just felt like the intuitive thing to do with a smallish group and no particular pressure. And I think that's something that does kind of get lost in the pressures of the curriculum. I think if you think about, we're going back to brains and nerdy stuff, but when you learn something, your brain uses some sugar to change how your brain's wired, and there's an evolutionary reason for that, because brains evolved so that you can not get eaten by something. That's part of its function, is to keep us alive and avoid bears and whatever. And so the sort of the experiences that you have when you're learning stuff, what your brain does is it judges whether it has value by whatever means. And obviously that's come from a sort of a survival thing. But I mean, obviously hopefully we've mostly moved on, bears at least. But
oh, I don't know. I don't know. It's a scary world out there, Martin.
Well, that's it. But then, so what we have is this like dopamine hit, which is the kind of like the thing which Facebook exploits and Twitter exploits, and that thing when or just someone pays you a compliment and it feels good, and and you can and people, technology products particularly manipulate that for engagement, so that you watch adverts, and which is why Facebook's so addictive, and they just do it brilliantly. But it's purely intentional. I suppose what Spelling Shed does, and what a lot of these sort of tech products, is kind of harness that kind of interaction. And if you're going to be on a screen doing something, let's use this stuff to engage you in the thing that we want you to learn. And so it's a tool, even non-tech. The thing where you ask the question but you don't say the kid's name right until the end, or you do a lollipop stick, that's gamification. You're adding some jeopardy, spelt correctly now, because I do spell check.
This is your hill to die on, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're never going to get past it.
Well, but yeah, I mean, and to be fair, in the tech team, when we're designing games, something that we sort of talk about, the kind of what makes a game fun, is a really nebulous kind of idea, and part of that is jeopardy. You have to have something to lose. There has to be something which there's a bit of a bit of tension, or a bit of a surprise, or and that's what makes it feel compelling, when something seems easy but actually is quite hard. Like Flappy Bird is a great example of a game which it seemed so easy, yet it really wasn't. And that's and I think that's where there's a real craft, which, you know, we have, I think 2.2 million kids a month play Spelling Shed, which blows my mind. But so obviously done some of that relatively well. But it's, you know, what we're doing is kind of harnessing psychology, and it's the psychology of what's interesting, what's relevant, and what makes you feel good. And another part of that is nobody likes to fail, and so that thing which I said at the start about having the game so that you succeed with maybe more or less help, or to a greater degree, or you get a bigger score or an even bigger score, but you still get a score. You've still succeeded, and so it feels safe. And so, you know, you're not failing. You're just trying to progress, and you feel safe. Those things really matter. And there's, you know, some other stuff, I suppose, about like people, not just kids, tend to want to close loops. So having unfinished things, it's like getting rid of the red spots on my phone. It really bothers me when I've got red spots on my phone and I have to get rid of them. And again, that, you know, apps know that, so they give you leave Facebook and a notification comes up just as you leave, and it's deliberate because people like to close loops. Another thing that kids and you know, older kids, older people, as adults have as well, the tendency to, people tend to either be competitive or they tend to like to curate things and have control. And so things like, we've got our little avatars, which is really, you know, common, you know, in lots of our products there. But it's just a little motivating driver. And I say it's just all these little tools. Actually, what you're doing is you're just engaging people in a way that gives them relevance for whatever it is that you're aiming at them.
Can I just jump in, Martin? There, sorry. Yeah. And what we've done as a conscious decision is that the playing is all about the spelling, or is all about grammar in our new grammar games. What we don't do is children climb through a cave or up a tree, or they fight a dragon and then they spell a word, and then they go and fight a knight and swim across the ocean and then spell a word. In Spelling Shed, you spell words 10, 20, 30, 40 words in 10, 15 seconds. It's not gamification for gamification's sake. Some games, I've seen spelling games, you have to hit a bullseye on a dartboard, then you get to spell a word. And then you get to, hitting a bullseye has got nothing to do with spelling. You know, that is literally just about playing a game for the sake of it, to engage the pupils in the game. And then they might spell a word every now and again. Whereas with spelling, the game is the spelling. Spelling is the game.
And I think that's really interesting because, yeah, I mean, it's sort of getting rid of the gump, isn't it? Because I think a lot of the time, these games and things are so, it's almost been overshot in the sense that the sort of the original purpose is lost through all the kind of lovely other stuff, and, you know, the actual, you know, the thought that's gone into that, the design, the creation, whatever, fab, but it's missing the actual point. And with you know, Martin talking about the cycle, it's really scratching a good part of my brain. This, I'm loving that we're getting into the nitty gritty. This is great. It's, you know, what this boils down to is the purpose, and what we need children to do on the back of this is learn to spell. That is ultimately the point, with the enjoyment factor, of course, being part of that. But it's kind of, the idea is not to distract them, because I mean, I'm so easily distracted. I'm so easily, like, you know, but I think from what you're saying here, what my understanding is you can still get that dopamine hit, that kind of woohoo, without the fluff or the gump, whatever you want to call it, because you've still got the game aspects, just without the kind of the distracting elements.
So I suppose I even wrote down before I started my spiel about brains, that you should never apologize for learning. And that's sort of another of those little principles. I mean, it's not just, you know, obviously our product, as Rob says, you know, you're playing with the content, not kind of as a consequence of sorry, you've got to do some spelling. Have a little game, and then we'll do some spelling, and then we'll let you have another game. That is what you're implicitly saying is that actually that this thing doesn't really have as much value as it should do. And part of that, I think, comes from the fact that when you're a child and you see something for the first time and it's novel, it's different than when you've done it for 1,000 times as an adult. But, you know, and children, they spend their little learning machines. They go to school, they cram their brains full of stuff all day long. It's what them, you know, it's how they work, and that you should never be apologetic for that, I think. But I think a good educational game is playing with the education, not around it or instead of it.
I've just got Hannah in the background. She's just mentioned she wanted to know. Now, obviously, Spelling Shed, we know it being used in schools, in school contexts, but are parents able to use this at home? Is the access available to parents at home, even if their schools aren't using it, for example?
Yep, there's so the app's just on the App Store, so you can just get it directly. And we actually, I was looking at our data today, and we actually have more parent accounts than single teacher subscriptions.
Oh wow!
Schools is our biggest cohort, if you like. And you know, whether it's a teacher or a school that's the sort of subscriber, I suppose hopefully it evolves. But actually, we've got quite a lot of teacher accounts, and we've got a little subscription plan that suits those households and homeschoolers and or just families that are trying to supplement.
And why do you think there's been such a growth in that? Do you think it's because maybe more people are homeschooling, or because parents are just actually more interested in looking for resources to use at home, or is this something that was sort of seen maybe in the wake of COVID? What's your sort of thoughts, or do you have the statistics on that?
I think maybe that parents see the children texting and then think, oh, my children can't spell. because if I went on, my eldest is 14.
Sorry, I shouldn't have found that as funny as I did.
My eldest is 14, and if I went on how he spelt off by the text he sent to me, I think he would need to stay in and do extra spelling. But actually, he can spell. I just don't get to see his school books very often.
I think if you look at our app sales, they really follow the school year, and I think a lot of app sales are parents who they're trying to support their child for a school that has our product. So then there's that. So it's sort of separating what is what is just an independent sort of user and what is kind of because of a school. But one thing we do get quite a lot as in support is parents who say sort of like, my child's school has this, that, or the other product. Can we plug the words in? And you can. So it's we sort of tried to make everything kind of unbundleable, so you can just use it whatever. It's classrooms are different, so you can take it apart and put it back together again. Obviously, we've designed a thing that we think works all together, but and I think that's where a lot will have either just use our thing directly because they want their kids to learn and they for whatever reason either they're homeschool or they're dissatisfied or whatever, or they're more often I think it's actually a school foolishly doesn't have Spelling Shed and they're trying to help.
Well, I'll be paying a visit to my head teacher tomorrow, and I'll see what I can do. I know that one of my colleagues used it last year. He sort of sounds awful, but he went rogue, shall we say, and sort of tested it out. And he absolutely loved it, and I think maybe tried to get it rolled out. But I actually plugged this show in my we one of those schools who unfortunately has Google Chat, so I very much plugged this show in my Google Chat today, which he will have seen. So also, he may well be listening in which case, hello. And if you are listening, can we get a Spelling Shed, please? I don't know how he'll feel about that. We'll see. We'll see when I wander in at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning whether he's listened to this and is in a giving mood or not. But no, it's really interesting to know that there's so many parent accounts, but also just going back to the layout, because I know you say people can kind of dip in and out and use bits and pieces, but from what I see, the way it's designed, it's very intuitive and very easy to follow, and it's clear that a lot of thought has got into how each stage works, because you call them stages, don't you? And how each one kind of develops and connects together, and what's good about it, because sort of going back to kind of earlier in the show when we talked about the idea that teaching spelling, kind of where to fit it in, all the rest of it is difficult, and some teachers like me kind of maybe sort of try and fight against it. Don't come after me, don't come at me. But it's when you've got something that is so well designed and so easy to use from the teacher side as well, because I think that's an aspect that's important too, because yes, you can give kids something and they can kind of, as you say, play, explore, kind of work their way through it. They can figure it out. But if as a teacher you're finding it easy to follow, to connect it, to make it part of your wider curriculum, that's also crucial too. Because as we've said, with a lot of tech coming into use with all these things, I think some people are a bit kind of freaked out because there's so much out there now that you can use. It's kind of, oh, how do I use this? How do I kind of do that? But what I liked when I was exploring the website is that it is easy to follow. It is intuitive. It is there and ready for you. You don't kind of need to, you can kind of go through it and be like, okay, I can see the journey for my class at this particular time. I can kind of see what's going to happen and see how they're going to go through and kind of how I can assess and all the rest of it. So in that sense, I think it's, it can be used, being used as is great.
Thank you for saying so.
So, I thought you were going to carry on there, but just going back, just touching on this this gamification aspect still as well. I mean, sort of going forward in terms of the development, and I suppose this is more of kind of really an EdShed question, I guess, more than a spelling shed question. Where do you see the sort of the further development? I mean, are there plans to kind of take things further, to expand on things? What's kind of the sort of the next steps for you here? I suppose.
Okay.
I'm just intrigued to know.
Okay, so there's a list of things that I wanted to launch last September, which we're nearly there. There's 3 particular things which are sort of either almost done imminently or coming very soon. One is by sort of launch order, I suppose. The first thing which is launching, which tech tells me is tomorrow, is a thing called Mastery Zone. And what that does, it does particularly help sort of parent and sort of independent child users, is it does a little kind of AI leveling thing that says, like a little diagnostic, works out what level approximately a child's working at, and then it moves them forward, but it also it sort of probes the prior learning that they should have and tries to find and fill gaps actively. So it's a kind of like auto drive spelling thing. So if you, particularly older children that had, COVID, everyone's got gaps. So the idea is that it can sit in the background and it can do that thing of keeping knowledge active, but also seek out and report on where there are particular sort of bits of an understanding that they don't have, and whether it's just a case of a bit more practice will remind them, or actually teachers need to go and do interventions. That's obviously the teacher's decision based on the data. So that's far more complicated than I envisaged it would be, which is why it's took 6 months longer than I thought it would. That should be launching tomorrow about 3 o'clock or so.
Super cool. So
tell me.
So we're kind of right. So we're kind of getting almost sort of the. I mean, I'm sure you've been plugging this for a while, so it's not exactly a kind of cheeky, sneaky update that we're privileged enough to get, but it does feel a bit like that. So that's really cool.
That's it. So that's it tomorrow. And the thing that delayed it, to be fair, was there's a chart on there, and we just decided it was a bit too complicated for younger children, so we've sort of simplified the metric that the kids get given. That was
I didn't understand it.
Rob didn't understand it, so we made it simpler. So I screened it in my school with the year 6s and year 2s. The kids did largely understand it, but
nothing like colleagues dropping each other in it live on air. So see, you two have started doing it now. We were doing it. TCR colleagues were doing it earlier. Now you two are doing it.
But that's it. But and I think it's what it's ended up is a bit like if you use things like Accelerated Reader, where you have the ZPD. I did consider calling it a Shed PD, but I thought it was a bit too contrived. So we've got a mastery level, which is your sort of stage equivalent place. And so, but I said that'll come out tomorrow. So there'll be marketing about that, obviously, when it's actually available. Yeah. The next thing which is coming out is a bit more dull from a whizzy tech point of view, but it's hopefully really useful for teachers, which is just better assessments and diagnostics. So end of term assessments, which give a sort of reports on how well has the learning stuck, and again, what sort of interventions might you want to do, which kids have missed which things. So just sort of rigor in the data. And then the third thing, which we haven't really talked about, I don't think, is we've basically made a whole load of grammar and punctuation games and a thing called Grammar Arcade. So it will be bundled in with Spelling Shed. And what that gives you is like a specific game for parenthesis, a specific game for firing a comma into a sentence, all sorts of stuff like that, which the games mostly exist. What we're doing is working through all the content. There's like 100, you did the spreadsheet, Rob, didn't you? There's 100 and something learning points, aren't there? So.
And it'll be completely free to spelling shed users. We're not adding any cost on.
Yeah, so all of those. Well, all of these are free if you've got a spelling shed subscription. So and so Grammar
brilliant.
Arcade.
That's well worth. You need to say that louder. That's well worth saying. Well worth mentioning.
Halfway through saying that, I wasn't sure. Then I said it, and then that's why I said it quite quietly. I started saying it, and then thought, oh yeah, we are.
Well, Robert's out there now, so you can't increase your prices. Yeah. Sorry.
True.
That's it.
But we don't normally plug anything. We used to plug things and say, "Come in on Friday," something, and then it'd come out 2 weeks later. Everyone used to complain. So now we just say, "Surprise! We've made something new."
Always the best way. Love a surprise. Sorry, Martin. Carry on. We're cutting you.
But that's it. So that at the moment, the goal that I have, which is never hard and fast, as Rob says, we've learned, and that's part of the journey of some teachers going and making products that have gone crazy, is how all this stuff works. And we've learned that there's a big difference between an estimate and a deadline, I suppose. And so what we're hoping is that we can launch it before the summer holidays, so schools can kind of get a preview. But I mean, it'll come out when it's ready, basically. Definitely before September, if I can possibly help it be so. But hopefully, as it's the PAG. You've got the S, and then there's the rest of SPAG that we've got teaching content that we've had for ages, but we've never had sort of games for that. So, and hopefully the thing that was, I had a year 4-5 class, and I seemed to spend the entire year, all I taught was apostrophes and punctuating speech for a year. And it's those sorts of things that if you get stuck on a certain concept, having a way to practice that specific learning thing in a sort of fun sort of a way, hopefully adds some value. So that's the goal.
And I think as well, sometimes I'd like to make this point that some people don't realise how small a company we are, because we're so big and we're in 180 countries or whatever, and we get to fly around the world. Martin and I are off to Cape Town, Johannesburg next week, Martin, and I'm off to Cape Town in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But a lot of these education companies have more staff for their maths product than we have for all of our products. So we have Maths Shed, Phonics Shed, Quiz Shed, Spelling Shed, Literacy Shed, and we have one team that does all of that stuff. And some companies just do phonics, have a bigger team than we've got to do all those different products. So I think Twinkle have got 1,040 staff and we've got 40. So sometimes things take a little longer to get out.
Well, if you need another one, I'll come and work for you. I think I'm sold. I want to come and work for you lot. I'm going to harass you on LinkedIn after this and just be like, please have me. I'm not even kidding. So lots of exciting things to look forward to. That's really, really cool. And across the board as well. And I also, it's important to note as well that yes, we've very much focused on Spelling Shed this evening, but there is, of course, Phonics Shed, Literacy Shed, Quiz Shed, did you say? That wasn't on my list.
Yeah, so Quiz Shed, we made Quiz Shed. This is all the little anecdotes that are coming up. We made Quiz Shed because we originally Math Shed tech was just like arithmetic stuff. And there are just some things that you can't do in a kind of tech generated way. So we needed a quiz thing. So we made it and we're like, we've made a whole quiz product here. Why don't we just launch it? So we just made it available for free, but essentially it exists for our own convenience for the SPAG question sets and the Math Shed question sets are all sort of built on that engine. So, but it's just a free tool. Like we built it, we might as well just let people do stuff. So,
you can make your own quizzes on there.
Yeah.
Oh, fab!
It does. It even does the video quiz. It's like the video to Ed Puzzle do a thing that there's that's in there. It's free. So.
I know what I'm doing tomorrow afternoon. That's brilliant. I did not know about that because I had all the others here in my very detailed chicken scratch notes here, but I did not have that one. But I love the fact that you created it. We're just like, we like this. I think other people will like it too. Have it, and I think that's such a lovely thing.
Martin made. Martin made. I say to Martin, "Could you make this?" And he goes, "Oh, not sure." And then we have a chat about it. Martin made a piece of tech that is out there. It needs polishing, but it's there. You can use it. Where you scan children's writing, and then it highlights which words are spelled incorrectly on the page.
No way!
But the thing is, that's made from my own, and it's authentic. My little soapbox, my hill that I'll die on, is when people, from outside education, and to be fair, there are some great companies. I don't want to be rude to people. There are some great companies run by people who come from outside education, but there are lots that people come and they go, I'm going to do tech to education, and they don't really understand the problem that they're trying to solve. I spent hours highlighting statutory words in year 5 and year 4 writing, in that same class actually that I mentioned before. And it just drove me absolutely potty. And I had this thing, I was like, do you know what would have made my life so much better? Being able to just take a picture, choose the list, and then just save it. Because it just, you lose the will to live after a point. So that's in there. What I'd love to do with that, which it's a team capacity thing. If we had another 20 software developers, is to be able to expand it to look for like punctuation and a bit more meaning and all that. But at least for now, you can scan it and you can find the words in there, and that's included with the spelling shed license as well. It's just sort of in there, and you can build up like a moderation folder and that sort of thing. So.
Wow, I mean, and I think it's important to note, as you say, there are, in order for all these things, sort of ed tech things, and again, it's evolving all the time, and there are lots of things out there, as we know, but you have to be addressing a problem. And I think that in all the things we've talked about, or not necessarily always a problem, addressing something that needs working on, that needs a bit of a nudge, a bit of support, because I mean, as we sort of said at the beginning of the show, certainly for me, and I'm sure for other primary teachers especially, that spelling puncture, it's always a bone of contention with the testing, with the SATs, with everything else. It's become a bit of that kind of part of education. And to have something in the mix that changes that, brightens that, makes it a bit more sunny, and just is able to support teachers and pupils in such a lovely way, I think is so crucial. And it's a testament to what you've created. And I certainly have really sort of changed my tune over the course of this evening. I mean, I'm not saying I came into this show negatively, because I absolutely didn't, but I have cynicism towards sort of, yeah, grammar and spelling teaching and all the rest of it. And so to be able to have the privilege to explore Spelling Shed and to kind of unpick some of my own sort of misconceptions and things as well has been really, really great. And I hope that on the back of this show, other people do the same thing. Other people who maybe are in my shoes and need a bit of a shove in a positive direction can go and explore all the tools for all the different things, be it maths, be it phonics, be it spelling, etc. So you've certainly brightened my evening and given me a lot to think about this evening. So I'm enormously grateful to the two of you for just that. But coming to the end now, and you've answered my question in the terms of kind of the next steps. And Martin, I'm sure your brain you seem to strike me as that person that has the brain that's constantly kind of looking, okay, next thing, what am I going to do next? I've kind of, where am I going to go with this, that, and the other? So, I mean, wow. And the idea that you're developing or have developed a tool that can kind of scan children's work, and that that could maybe go further in the future is phenomenal. And I look forward to seeing kind of more of that stuff. It has been an absolute privilege to have the two of you this evening and to answer my very convoluted and round the houses questions. So I do appreciate both of you for kind of bearing with that and answering so beautifully as well. Just before we go, where can we find you in terms of links, websites, Twitters, LinkedIn's, etc.?
So edshed.com, spelling shed, basically somethingshed.com. We'll probably find something related to us.
Edshed, lit shed.
Yeah,
but not garden shed.
Not yet.
That
was a terrible joke. I'm sorry.
I'm Reggie Rob on Twitter. REDGIE, Reggie Rob. It's an old school nickname, but.
And then I can see Spelling Shed are actually in the space at the moment, so they're just at Spelling Shed, aren't they?
Yeah, we've got lots.
Yep, you're all over LinkedIn as well, I know, because I've been tagging you in things all week. So pretty much very easy to find. And I suppose if we Google you as well, it's easily done.
Yep, we're out there. And the other, I suppose, the place where I think we're active, I know it's a different platform, but there's some Facebook groups which are quite big, which people seem to use as like a proxy customer support thing, which that there's this 5-6 official group, isn't there, that we tend to pop in, and a few others that are like that, which is fine. And I think that's, it's nice that we're able to do that.
Facebook page.
Yeah, you've got Education Shed, it's got a Facebook group, Spelling Shed, Lit Shed for Literacy Shed, and Phonics Shed as well. You're all over Instagram as well. I've just realised that you're everywhere. Absolutely everywhere.
Instagram,
yeah. Instagram, LinkedIn, all the platforms.
That's it. So, and credit to Jasmine, our social media manager or marketing manager, for running all those accounts, because we would never manage to do that.
Oh, wow.
Although,
yeah.
Jasmine didn't tell me that this was audio only, so I went to barber's this afternoon. I've had a lovely haircut and I've had a wet shave with a hot towel.
Oh,
I thought it was being recorded.
Well, next time.
Cost me 30 quid.
Yeah. To that last time I did a podcast and I prepared the wrong questions, so did a half-hour podcast completely off the cuff. So, you know.
Oh, we've all been there. We've all winged things in our lives, be it lessons, be it radio shows, and sometimes it is a roaring success, and other times it is terrible. But that's just part of life, isn't it? But Robbie, we do a weekly review, which is visual as well as audio on Sundays. If ever you want to pop onto that, having been to the barbers, you are free to do so as a panel guest at some point. I regularly host that, and I'm going to confess something terrible now, where I've much like in COVID, my top half is kind of business, and I've still got my pajama bottoms on. And Tom HB, if you're listening to this, that's absolutely not true. I just told a lie. So it can be done. You can still pull off the COVID look and do it very successfully.
Business on the top, party on the bottom.
Absolutely, and llama slippers as well. I have fantastic llama slippers that are usually on my feet when I'm doing weekly review as well. So next time you watch that, you'll be aware that yes, I'm probably still wearing my pajamas, at least on the bottom half. On that cheerful note, I am going to wish you all a very good evening. I'm going to say thank you once again to Rob and to Martin, who have been absolute stars this evening. I do hope we'll talk to you again at some point. This show will be available as a podcast in the near future, in the next few days. Won't it, Tom Rogers? He's nodding sagely in the background there. But it's also available to listen back on here for the next 30 days. Please do a reminder that Tom Hopkins Berkshirt's show tomorrow, I can't even speak properly at this point, show tomorrow is at least in part addressing phonics in secondary school, so that'll be a nice follow-on from this one. I'll be back at some point in March, I think in a couple of weeks' time. The dates are all over the place at the moment, with another show probably linked to my international school series that I started and then had to abandon for various other reasons. So I think I'm going to start that up again. Have a lovely rest of the week, everybody, and I will talk to you all soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.